All right, welcome to the third installment of the elk hunting webinar series. Again, with me today is Joe McDermott. I'm John Hast. We're going to get into this one pretty quick. Just share a title slide here real quick as we go. But today, essentially, we're going to focus on strategies for the secondary draw, so the unit draw, and that's going to happen July 2nd. We'll probably say that date 100 more times today. And kind of before we get into this one, I think if you've not watched episode 1, may be worth your time to go back and check out episode 1 just to get up to speed on the My Profile system. So we're basically going to take a pretty deep dive into the area unit draw that you'll have to do before July 2nd. So also one little bit of housekeeping today before we get into this thing. We've reorganized our elk website system. So you may have noticed those changes here over the last week, but kind of got it divided into a little bit better way where the info for our hunters is kind of differentiated from the info, say, on like research or elk viewing opportunities or the history of elk. We've got things laid out a little bit better that we think will make it easier for you. So again, today it's just me and Joe. We're going to run through really the nuts and bolts of the area unit draw, and a couple things to consider. So we've got plenty of time between when this posts and that July 2nd at midnight date where you'll have to apply for that draw. So Joe, let's get started. And I think on the front end, let's talk just kind of general about why we use elk hunting units, and maybe start with pulling that elk hunting unit overview map up and just run us through a couple things. So kind of one of my questions off the bat that I've gotten from a couple people here lately are, why do we have an EHU system?
Yeah, that's a good place to start. So, Eastern Kentucky is a pretty large area, but we aren't as fortunate as like our Western counterparts, right? We don't have near the amount of public property that they do. And a lot of actually what you see here on this screen, so everything that's green is full public. If it's purple, it's a regulated area, but some of it's public for things other than elk. But the vast majority of that is actually privately owned that we've gotten to an agreement with. So number one, we just don't have the available public property that we would like to have to distribute hunters on. So some of the older iterations of the elk hunting systems, it just kind of saw, especially the last one where you had an at-large system, you kind of saw a lot of congregations on the available public property, especially where it was at large. It just makes it tough. It's a lot of hunter crowding. There's a higher chance that those animals are going to get pressured and leave it completely. So that's really our main reason, is just to distribute the hunting pressure throughout the zone. And I said we do have limited public hunting opportunity, and really we're hoping that with this system we can make that limited opportunity even better, right? So say there's only 10 archers that can hit this one property as opposed to 50 or 60 or whatever it was in the older systems. Well, that's less people that are actively chasing animals there. It's less people that are actively moving elk. So hopefully there'll be less pressure on those animals overall, and over time make it a little bit better hunting experience for these guys. And some of the older systems that Haas, maybe you want to speak to a little bit, we've seen chances for localized overharvest. I wouldn't say overharvest on a population level, but in individual areas. And that was one of the things that you had learned in your dissertation work, right? You want to?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just looking at this map, we had back in, we made the transition between 2012 to 2013 is when we put in the limited entry areas. Anybody that hunted, prior to the 19 season would have possibly been drawn for a limited entry area. And so I focused a lot of my work, just looking at this map, is kind of around where Paul Van Boeven WMA is illustrated there. And at the time, that was one of our biggest kind of complexes of public land. We've had a couple of landowners drop out in that area recently, but essentially there was lots of opportunity for a public land hunter in that area. And so when we were in 2012, before limited entries, basically we would have, I know personally that I had 95 hunters hunt my study area in 2012. And we were seeing just incredibly low rates of bull survival. And that wasn't due to anything other that they were being harvested. I mean, and so, you know, kind of with that going into 2013, we went to the limited entry system, mainly to cut down on basically pressure on our public land areas. And we sort of coined the term localized overharvest. And that's what it was. It's just these popular areas with good hunting access were getting hammered. So sort of the modern day extension of that is, and it's a much better system than we've had in place before, is these elk hunting units, the EHUs, and then coupled that up with the regulated areas. So definitely seeing hunting pressure spread out, and really it's not so much about removing the animals, but it's got a lot to do with that hunting pressure, where long term and over the course of the season, we're going to have better opportunity for everybody as they come through across the zone, because we've got people spread out.
Good point. And I mean, I'll add on it too. Under the old system, you know, I had a lot of people, especially if they're at large. It's just like, where do I go? There's so much property to hunt. You know, this kind of helps people also, you know, not just spread them out, but it helps you, once you find your unit, it helps you focus your efforts. So you're not just like a cat chasing his tail, running from Pike County down to Harlan County, running around. Because the old system, I say, what, the at large is probably 65-75% of the total available area to hunt. So that's another benefit of this too. Once you know your unit, you can spend your time there.
Yeah, I mean, the elk zone, 4.1 million acres. You know, I have a hard time scouting my farm for deer, and it's a you know, tiny fraction of that. So we're looking at 4.1 million acres here, and then even, you know, cutting it down into 6 units, you're still talking about hundreds of thousands of acres to cover. I mean, the better part of, you know, 2 or 3 counties in each one of these units to cover. So that's definitely a good point. And I definitely think it helps people focus a little bit. So just kind of an extension of this, why do we have this secondary drawing? Why wouldn't we just say have people put in for you know, unit 7 right off the bat? What's kind of the reason for this secondary drawing?
Well, it's like kind of along with the rest of it, we get so many applications, but we don't offer enough permits like a place like Colorado or Wyoming or you know, one of our western counterparts, where they can just apply to a straight up unit. You know, that would definitely, so you imagine trying to figure out how to make your 3 choices behind all these different units with the different permit types, and it would make the odds and everything just super funky. But ultimately, we want to do the secondary drawing to give people a chance to apply to hunt where they want to, right? Like that's our way of you know, applying for a specific unit in Colorado. We want everybody to have a chance to make their selections, look at what's out there, talk to, you know, their buddies, talk to outfitters, whoever they might want to try to get narrowed down to a place that you actually really want to be. So that's why we do it, just to give these guys a chance. We can't really do it on the front end.
Yeah. And so really the timeline of things, I mean, you know, the draw was May 15th. You know, stuff went up on my profile last week, and we're kind of running through things. You've got till midnight, July 2nd.
Midnight, July 2nd.
And those results should come out like July 15th, I think, 15th or 16th.
16th is what we have currently posted.
Yeah. So from that date, you know, after that date in July, you'll know exactly what unit you've got, and really you've still got lots of good time to scout. That's really when I think the serious scouting, you know, you get to late July and August. If you're got any of the, you know, an either sex archery tag or those gun tags, that's really the time to be getting out, getting the boots on the ground and doing some scouting for sure. So we've talked about the elk hunting units. So really what are hunters applying for? And you know, we talked about elk hunting units, but how do our regulated areas fall into, you know, into this July 2nd deadline?
Yeah. So when you're looking on this this map here, everything that's purple is currently listed as a regulated area for elk hunting. And just as a refresher from the first video, the regulated areas, I'm just going to call them RAs so I don't keep getting tongue tied. The RAs are privately owned properties where we've got limited access to elk hunting. Sometimes there's other species involved. It just kind of depends on the property, but primarily for our purposes, we'll talk about elk hunting. When we work these agreements with the landowners, they'll basically tell me I'll allow X number of hunters per season. So we go on and we try to put up all the information about the property we know, and we show you how many hunters are available there. But you apply for a regulated area and a unit at the same time. And if you're drawn for a regulated area, the RA, I'm doing what I said I wasn't going to do. You apply for the RA, then by default, you are going to be placed in the unit that it's located in, right? So let's just, if you can see where my cursor is down here, this purple that I'm circling, this is Middlesboro RA. It's located in Unit 2. So say I apply for Unit 2, Middlesboro is in there. I get Middlesboro. I'm going to be in Unit 2. But when you draw for an RA, you're not just stuck on that one property. You also have the ability to hunt anything else that's full public. So all the rest of this green in here, and then everything that's private that you get permission on, which is basically all the tan stuff that's listed on the map. So it would behoove you to at least apply for one if for nothing else, and it's an extra place to go. And as we'll talk about in a little bit, I think if you spend some time looking at some of the information we have online, that you'll be able to see that you can actually make your selections for these properties to try to help you end up where you want to be.
Yeah, for sure. So just to reiterate that, don't, you know, I think we get a number of calls in here where people are I guess in fear that if they draw a regulated area, and some of those are as small as 200-300 acres, that's the only place they could hunt. And that's not the case. So you get a regulated area by default, you have that unit to hunt. And again, you can hunt the green public WMA areas that are in there. And also any private land that you can get permission for in that unit. And just while we're talking about this, so there, you know, several years ago, you used to be able to switch units. So that's no longer the case. So you draw a unit, you're there. If you draw a regulated area as well, you've got that to hunt, but by default, you hunt that unit, and that's all you can hunt during the course of the season.
And that'll go back just to like what we were talking about earlier with your dissertation work. I mean, it's all to prevent localized overharvest. The unit system distributing hunting pressure across the area, you know, doesn't really work if I can keep stacking hunters, you know, moving them from one unit to another. Yeah.
And just to go back on that, we used to see, I mean, from year to year, there'd be a new hot spot. You know, over the course of the season, everybody'd figure out a new hot spot, and we'd dump 50 or 100 hunters in there, and the next year it would not be the hot spot because they were removed via hunting, but they were also pressured and, you know, left the county. Elk have legs that are 4 feet long. They're going to go somewhere that, you know, where they can live in peace during the fall. So, essentially, let's get more into the nuts and bolts on exactly how I make these selections. And I'll remind people that check out episode number 1. You know, Joe's got the My Profile system up, but we do a good pretty high level overview of what we've got to offer there in Unit 1. And then for this video, we're diving straight into the you know, hunting unit and regulated area selection process.
All right, so right here, I've logged into your My Profile, and I will just reiterate, this is our test account. I'm not logged into any one hunter. This isn't my personal one. It's just a test account so that we can make sure, you know, that we can see the information that we put up for the hunters, make sure everything looks right. But our test account has a bullfire in week 1. So I'm logged in to My Profile just like you would. And to actually go down and make my selections, if we want to start talking about that, it's here in this optional items area. it'll say select hunting unit and regulate area preferences right here, this little blue button. So I'll go through here and click this. Again, it runs through this will run through kind of how it works. Just it's written if you kind of forget. And you'll see the important July 2nd midnight deadline date in here. But if you go on down to the bottom, about halfway down to the bottom, you'll see the hunt unit overview and RA section. To make your selections, you just click on these drop down boxes. It's pretty simple. So you can pick, all the available properties are listed right here. Say I want Patty Matty Unit 3. I can make that selection, but notice that Patty Matty Unit 3 is now gone, so you can only pick each option once, nothing more than once. But this is how you make your selections. And say I just want to do one selection, I'm going to go ahead and submit it. If you ever forget what you did or anything like that, you just want to verify, you can go back and it'll tell you right here, you have selected for my first and only choice, Unit 3, Patty Matty Unit 3. If during this process, up until the deadline on July 2nd, you can go back in here and change them. We've got this nice little box that asks you if you're sure, so you can't do it by mistake. But you can go back in here and change them as many times as you want to, and just keep on going back down. You can adjust them as needed. Just submit them.
Yeah, and it definitely just kind of from my perspective, well, from I guess it's our advice. It's definitely worth applying for, making 5 choices, essentially. Because when you get, if you just made that one choice, if you didn't get Patty Matty Unit 3, then after that, you're just going into a random unit.
Yeah, I guess we should reiterate how the secondary drawing actually works. I do apologize for that. So, you go through, you have your ability to make your selections, and after the July 2nd deadline, they're locked in. All the data goes to a computer model, and each hunter is given a random number. So whenever your number is pulled, it's going to look at all of your choices in order before going to the next person. So, say Patty Matty is my first choice. If it pulls my number, that's my first choice. If there's an available spot there, it'll automatically put me in that property. If there's not an available spot there, it'll go to my next choice. So, I either have other selections or we just use the example that we just did where I only have one. But it'll basically keep going down the list until something that I said I wanted is open, and it'll put me in there. Or if if I didn't put anything in there or nothing I wanted is open, it'll just put me into a random hunting unit with an available spot for my permit type. So that's kind of how that secondary drawing works. And like you said, it is advantageous to you to make your 5 selections, unless you just really don't have a preference where you hunt, just because it gives you a chance to have input on where you're going and get the different properties or units that most interest you. I guess while we're here talking about it, we'll just go ahead and say it again, because I don't think you can say this one enough. When you're making your selections, make sure that the properties, if you're applying for an RA, make sure the properties that you're wanting to get into actually have openings for your permit type. So it's a little different than the first video because we had some changes, but for instance, my test account has, oh, hold on, this is excuse me. There we go. My test account has a bull firearm week 1 permit, and you can look here, see for the meta tract, there are no spots available for bull hunting at all. So if I have this bull firearm week 1 permit, I do not want to put in for this property because I'm essentially just guaranteeing that I'm wasting a selection. So just pay attention to that as you're going through the list.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point on that one. So what if basically a drawn hunter, so our test account, he could essentially do nothing. He or she, whoever our test account is, could essentially do nothing and get a random unit. I mean, we've got this whole unit draw regulated area is under the optional items. So what happens if somebody makes no selections? What ends up happening to them?
the computer program will just give you a random unit. So whenever
Yep.
your number comes up, it's just going to put you in a unit that's got an open spot for you. So you can do nothing and you're still going to be given a place to go. So it's okay if that's the route you want to go. It's just, you're not taking the chance to put, your input in to where you actually want to end up.
Yeah. Excellent. And I think, this is a good, we're going off script here just a little bit, Joe, just to prepare you.
All right.
But we get the question every year, I didn't get my first unit, or I didn't get my first or second unit. And I've used this example, I think in the first one, is a friend of ours that we turkey hunt with. He was given the random number of it was something crazy like 593 out of 595.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that is part of the luck of the draw on that front end. So he was the second to last person or third to last person to have his 5 choices looked at. And I would assume by that point, there was probably no, maybe no regulated areas of, left at the time. It's hard to say, but still he got a unit and ended up harvesting an elk. So
Mm-hmm.
not a problem there. But maybe while we're here, hit the go to some of those stats pages that you've put together, just so people can sort of have an idea and kind of walk people through those, if you don't mind.
So the stats page, are you wanting to look at based off your selections if you get something you want, or you want to dig into the others now?
No, I'm thinking just whether or not that one page that
Okay.
kind of lines
I
out
got you.
that one right there.
Yeah. So just to kind of help you guys understand, what your odds are of getting something that you want, we put together this little document that shows you basically how many hunters made how many selections, right? So here on the front, you can see this is 2020 data. You can see 68 of the hunters didn't make a selection. They didn't have a preference. And then, so on down the list to the 5 selections, which is what the overwhelming majority of people do. And that's, again, we think that's probably the most advantageous thing to do. The second table here shows you how many hunters got something that they wanted. So, 37% of hunters got their first choice. But what I think is most important is that 87% of people got one of their 5 choices. So, you add extra options in there, and it gives you a better chance of getting something you want.
Yeah. And really those are phenomenal odds of getting 5 places that you put into that selection. That's kind of why we're suggesting that. There's thinking back to regulated areas, there's some that are highly sought after, and there's others that are less so. And we've got some new ones that barely really, some of them we haven't had time to truly evaluate, much less a long history of good hunting on those areas. But maybe walk us over into that other page that just kind of looks at I think what the hunters are going to get from this next page is basically a decent evaluation of the sought after regulated areas.
Yeah. So this document here, it's called the area selection data. It's in that, it's located right here, right above where you actually go to make your selections, the hunting units and regulated areas documents. But it's the 2020 area selection data. And in my opinion, this is probably one of the most important documents that we have. It really, really shows you how people applied. And again, I can't predict how people are going to apply this year, but it does go through and at least show you what they've done in the past. So you can kind of figure out, at least historically or for last year, what were more sought after properties than others. But if you sit and think about this and you think about how you want to make your choices moving forward, this document's invaluable. You can really, I think, really dig into it and try to help you get into places you really want to be. But we've got one for every unit. We've got a page for every unit. Sometimes like unit 3, it's got more properties. It might spill over onto a second one, but there's a page for everything. And if you go through here, you can see what the property was. So this one, like, unit 3 only, it'll tell you the number of spots available per permit type. And then you have like Big Laurel here, and it does the same thing. So this is what was available for hunters last year. But you just go through, see how many people put this as their first choice, second choice, so on down the line. So you can kind of see what's, like we said, more desirable. But I think personally, if you look at some of these smaller properties or the less sought after properties, that's really pretty valuable information as well, because I think if you're smart about your selections, that can help you get into a place that you really want to be. But yeah, like I said, this is a really, really interesting document. And if you spend a little bit of time looking at it, I think it'll help you make your selections.
Yeah, absolutely. And so just to kind of, in my mind, I think, and a couple of folks I've talked to on the phone this week, what would be, I mean, in your mind, is there a disadvantage to picking all regulated areas? I mean, that's, I think a lot of people see regulated areas, they're like, I've got to be on one of those. Is there a disadvantage to that?
That's a good point. I'm glad you brought it up. In my opinion, the best thing that you can do is to at least try to end up in a unit, right? So you might have a couple different RAs that are in, across several units that you think are really interesting. But the way I look at it is that you're probably better off to have a unit only option, or maybe 2 of them at the end, just to help you narrow it down. So let's look here, just unit 3 only again, right? Just as an example. Say I've got the bull firearm week 1 permit. There are 21 bull firearm permits that can go into this unit. If I only put in RAs, so there's Big Laurel, there's Harlan County Hoskins, Leatherwood, Leslie County Hoskins. I mean, most of these have 1 spot available per permit type. So say I'm like one of the fellows who gets picked, later on in the list, and I'm only picking properties that got 1 or 2 spots available. I mean, chances are that by the time it gets to me, I'm not going to, all those spots have already been taken. And then I'm just by default going to go into a unit, which we say it's not the worst thing, but that's just what will happen. But if I have like a unit 3 only option at the end, there's 21 spots available there. I've got a better chance of, that being open come my time. And, same thing with like unit 4, right? There's 20 spots available for this one, as opposed to all these properties that are listed in here. They've got 1 spot for my bull week 1 permit. So you can play that if you want to. And maybe if you've got some of the smaller tracks that are, I would say less applied for, like let's see here, Highway 476. If you're including a mix of those in there, then maybe you would for sure have better odds. But I think it would be advantageous to most hunters, and that's what I try to tell them every time I talk to them, to at least think about where would I want to end up, what unit would I like to be in if I don't get any of my selections. So that's personally how I approach it. Everybody's a little different.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, and I think you brought up a good point there. Is the regulated areas might have a spot or 2 on them for your permit type, most likely 1 spot. So if you go through all 5 choices are regulated areas with a spot or 2 on them, and you don't get any of those 5, then you're going to a random unit. But I think unit 3 is a great example because there's great public land. We've got public land in all of our units, but unit 3 is probably where we've got the biggest bulk of just wide open public. Yep. So if you're do-it-yourselfer, for sure, I mean, that's an advantage, having that much space to roam on. So it would be an advantage to go through there and hit some of the, high priority, some of your top ticket regulated areas, put them at the top, but then throw in that unit 3 only down there. And at least get into a good unit that suits your hunting style. It's kind of where I was thinking with that one. And I think we get plenty of people that roll all the way through with regulated areas. At least the fellow I was talking to this morning, that was his plan. And I kind of explained it just as you have, that if you've got your eye on a unit, there's some different ways to increase your odds. And one of the simplest ways is to put that, say for this example, put that unit 3 only option in there, so that you don't, if you get a bad draw, go through all those top 5 and then you're going to a random unit.
Yep.
So I got you. And that makes perfect sense. So, and what you said, try to figure out if there's anything that you can narrow down right now is, take a look at your hunting style and try to figure out the type of unit that fits that. If you're a DIYer, you need public land. If you're local in the elk zone, or you've got family down there that if you've got land to hunt, if they've got connections with some private land, that instantly takes that unit further up the list.
Mm-hmm.
So don't hose yourself just hitting regulated areas all the way down and end up getting placed in a random unit. Work through the system strategically to get you in that unit you want. So I think that's kind of the takeaway. You might not be able to boil this down, for a specific regulated area that you're in love with, but you can figure out what elk hunting unit is at the top of your list, kind of over the next month for sure.
Yeah, and that stuff, we do have harvest stats up here by permit type and unit. If that, that might help you. You can go through and look at the regular telecheck review data by counties or by public properties, and that'll help you kind of see how elk have been harvested, what counties are the hot spots. Our mobile ArcGIS app for the phone or the desktop, it works like Google Earth, pretty similar. I mean, you can go through and just look kind of grossly on a unit scale and see, well, this place has a lot more open area, a lot more mountaintop removal mining on the public areas. This place is more timber, right? Depending on your hunting style or your abilities, that stuff's important to you. So yeah, just to reiterate, we suggest having at least trying to have a unit in mind if possible.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with you on that one. And one thing, and you hit it on a little bit, and it's sort of something that I picked up on with some of our smaller regulated areas. Like how could that, and looking here just on the example that's up there, so that Harlan County Hoskins track was nobody's first choice.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a prime example that if you want to be in Unit 3, that's a good way to get into Unit 3.
Yeah, so
in that situation.
You want to run down kind of that scenario? Like, let's we can do it on Unit 3, or we can do it. We'll do this one. So let's say I'm a DIY guy. I only want to hunt public. Unit 3 is the place for me. That's the only place I want to go. So if I'm just trying to get into that unit, just personally, from my opinion, and looking at this data, I'm probably going to go through and see what properties, make sure they have a spot for my permit type, and make sure I can see which properties in here are less sought after, right? So if I really want to get into Unit 3 with a bull firearm week 1 permit, Harlan County Hoskins is looking pretty good. And remember, these properties, these RAs, when you're drawn for them, you can hunt everything else that's public or everything else that's private you get permission on. So don't let the fact that it's a 200-acre property or that it might not have the best harvest success deter you. Because in this example, we're just trying to get into that unit. So it helps you to go through and look at some of these properties, like the Harlan County Hoskins or Leslie County Hoskins. And I'll tell you right now, I can't believe that one no one applied for. Or maybe even something like, Thunder Ridge. But that's, if I'm really wanting to end up in a unit, a specific unit, I'm going through where I'm able to and picking these properties that are less sought after and making those my first or second choices. And then I'll, ultimately try to fill the remainder of my choices with RAs, but I'm going to always end up with that Unit 3 only option. If in this scenario, I'm a DIY guy, bull firearm week 1, I want to be in Unit 3, and that's what I want. Does that kind of make sense? How we're going through and looking at these places like that?
Yeah, I'm thinking so. And I mean, if you wanted to be in, definitely wanted to be in unit 3, hit some of these RAs, but then always put that, unit 3 only in there somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
A couple down the system. Um, and then you can always shoot for the moon and throw what kind of comes to mind is some of the more highly sought after regulated areas. Middlesboro comes to mind. There's several of them, but maybe that's pick one. But ultimately, if you didn't want to just be in unit 2 general,
Mm-hmm.
then immediately on choice 2, you're getting into these unit 3 places. So you kind of shoot for the moon on number 1 and number 2, and then move into that unit system, move into attempting to get the unit that you want to be in, for sure.
Yeah, and that's a good example here. So we'll look right now. Let's focus on a couple of the ones that are a little more highly sought after. So Middlesboro here, 6 guys applied for bull week 1, 5 applied for bull week 2. But you see, there's not really many secondary options here. Let's go down to unit 6. Let's look at the czar tract. So this will actually be changed a little bit because as of this year, there will be a bullfire in week 1 spot. But, look at the number of people that are applying for this for their first choice. I mean, it's a pretty desirable place. It's probably an easier property to hunt in terms of just the terrain, the topography. Something similar would be like a Cambrian. It's pretty sought after for archery hunters generally, but easier terrain. So if I'm really, wanting to have like he said, a shoot for the moon property, I might go through and pick something like this, like a czar or a Middlesboro or a Cambrian, or this year the Tug Fork will be a pretty highly sought after property too, just because its size. But I might pick 1, maybe 2 of those, but then I'm going to revert back. Like, okay, if I don't get one of these really sought after properties, I'm still at the end of the day want to end up in unit 3. So I might make my 3rd and 4th choices like a Harlan County Hoskins or the Leslie County Hoskins, and then I'm going to end up with that unit 3 only option. So you can really kind of go through here and get creative with it. But again, I would always urge you to at least consider where, if I had to be in a unit, what unit would I really want to be in, and make that one of my 4th or 5th choices.
Yeah, and a lot of the places that we're saying are kind of shoot for the moon, those are places that within the unit on that regulated area themselves, they're large enough that's probably the only place that you'd need to hunt. And that's sort of the dividing line. Some of these other regulated areas are going to be smaller areas. They might have elk on them one day, but not the next. It just kind of all depends. They're all elky spots, but it kind of depends on the day of the week and how the herd's moving and that kind of deal. But it tends to be, just looking at the data that you've got together for last year, the most sought after spots tend to be large enough that it'll be enough acreage for you to hunt, during the duration of your tag. And that's kind of really the dividing line between sought after and less so, from what I can see from the data.
And going back to some of the unit 3 properties, other examples like Big Laurel, I think it's about 15,000 acres. You can see you've got a few more fellas for the bull firearm hunts that are putting in here. Leatherwood's like 30,000 acres, I want to say. So you've got a handful more people putting in here, but it's a good point. That's a good distinction for what's sought after. You generally don't have to go other places or to hunt as well. When you're looking at like the Leslie County Hoskins, it's a good property. There's good elk on it, but it sets in between all this other public too. And some tracks are definitely going to be better than others, but it just kind of, where they're smaller and it's more broken up, the elk might be on, across the imaginary property boundary to go to the CF Ataya as opposed to being on Hoskins that day. So it's a good point.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a great example. Those places in particular, and a lot of these places will be, I know there's some area over in Pike County that's basically a couple different regulated areas just stacked up next to each other, and this Hoskins stuff is in an area where it's stacked up next to a bunch of other public land. So even though, you know, let's say nobody's killed an elk off that property, that's not to say that they didn't use that property to access the elk that they killed on the WMA that's next door.
That's a good point too.
Yeah.
Good point too.
All right, with that, and there's lots of things we threw a lot of strategy at you there, but feel free to call us and we can walk you through that again. But it sort of reminds me of you know, if anybody's doing the Western elk hunting, maybe they've gotten on Go Hunt or something and just been able to look at those statistics. And I find it's probably the mind that Joe and I have. We're both pretty analytical and look at the data, and so we enjoy looking at this kind of stuff. And I feel like it's definitely an advantage when you're thinking like, you know, applying for Colorado or something, to be able to dig into the application data and have an idea what your odds are drawing it, and sort of just being able, you know, when we think about these Western trips, you know, we're needing a couple years out to plan, you know, so when could I, you know, reasonably be drawn? So that's kind of what we're trying to replicate in this situation. So the hunters out there that want to sit down and do some number crunching and really, you know, try to work the system in their favor. This is that resource for you. So and hopefully we explained ourselves clearly enough to kind of get that point across. But it's, you know, it's there, and there, I'm sure there's a million other examples, and certainly that Unit 3 example is just one that, you know, the page that we happen to be on there, we could walk you through an example for each one of these units, no problem. So with that, Joe, so there's this other thing that we've got that's called the leftover drawing, which is on August 9th. How does that play in to this whole system?
So the leftover drawings, it's basically it's available for well, let's back up. We want as many people to be able to hunt these properties as possible. Unfortunately, you know, we do have to follow the guidelines that the landowners are putting forth, right? So they say, I want one hunter right now, but maybe that hunter doesn't want to hunt that property. We try to make it to where we allow people to switch in and out of them. So on August 9th, let's say that you were one of the fellows who ended up just placed into a random unit. Well, any of these RA spots that did not fill up, you can go through on that date, and it's a first come, first serve process, and just go through and pick one that has an opening for your permit type, right? So we want to let, you know, give you guys the opportunity to get into different areas best we can. Going back to some of our other examples about maybe like the Harlan County Hoskins property, maybe I use that to get into Unit 3, but you know, a property that I didn't apply for based on the odds or the perceived odds going into it came open. Let's just say Leatherwood. Let's say I really wanted to hunt Leatherwood instead of Harlan County Hoskins. Well, you can drop the Harlan County Hoskins spot and pick up Leatherwood. But it's basically to fill up any remaining spots or give you guys a chance to switch around. And it's important to note that that system will remain active the rest of the year. So let's say I got Leatherwood as, you know, on my bull firearm week 1 hunter. Let's say I scouted it and didn't like what I saw. Well, I can drop my spot at any time. But at any time, as soon as you drop it, we'll post it back online. So if you're paying attention to my profile throughout the season, you know, there are spots that become available. So you can jump right back into an unfilled spot. But that's really the purpose it serves, just to give you guys an extra chance to get on a property, and then also to, you know, allow you to switch back and forth. I mean, there's generally spots that open up. Most often they open up either a day or two before season or a day or two after season has opened. And so the way it works is either, you know, they just release their spot, say they didn't hunt it or whatever it may be, they release it. Or they might even kill an elk elsewhere. If they kill an elk on that property, you know, so say Leatherwood, bull firearm week 1, there's 2 spots open. If I actually killed an elk on that property, then that spot can't be opened back up, because the agreements with the landowners is basically these are maximum harvest quotas. But say I killed it on a public area like Boone Forest Lands, I can release that spot and I actually will open it up because, we're not exceeding the harvest quotas. So that I do get quite a bit of questions about that. Why can't we, they killed an elk on that property. Why can't I go in there too? It's a harvest quota.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I think it's something for the hunters to be mindful of. Joe and I running this system up here, we don't know if you're hunting or not. And say, if you've got a week 1 firearm permit and you absolutely can only hunt Saturday and Sunday of that hunt, and you've got to be back at work on Monday, that's all good. But Joe and I don't know that you're not there. And so it just is a major courtesy to the other hunters. If you know that you're done hunting, just drop that spot. Certainly somebody may be able to jump in there Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday and have a good hunt. And the same goes for if you kill it on a different tract of public land. Just go ahead and just be thinking, drop that spot. It's just a courtesy to the other hunters, and just helps everybody have a good time. And like I said, Joe and I don't have any idea who's actually out there using it, so it's kind of on the honor system. We know who signed up for it, but whether or not they're there or not is not necessarily our business per se, but it comes down to the honor system. So if you're not going to use it, drop that spot. Give people an opportunity to pick it up.
Yep. And I will say that another function of this August 9th, the leftover drawing, we are always diligently working to try to acquire more public property for you guys to hunt on. If we are fortunate enough to get some more this summer, which is very possible, we try to release that property on that date, just so it's a open level playing field. Everybody can see it right there at the start. So that's another added bonus to this system as well. But
yeah, absolutely. And just a reminder, this thing's going on the whole hunting season. So it's not necessarily there's an August 9th. That's August 9th is essentially when it opens up. And we've used a form of this system since about 2015, I guess. And it's been pretty good. And there's a fair amount of shuffling that goes on during the season. And it's always something that, if Joe and I get a call a couple of days before the season, it's definitely going to be our probably number one recommendation is get on my profile and check out some of these open spots. Just a good place to start. Of course, we've got that information available, so we could be able to direct you to some that are open. But it's always something to be, casually peeking in, because everybody's got their hunting plan, and plans are changing, and as scouting goes along, and there definitely be some spots open up. So, all right, Joe, what do you think? Think we covered it? Think we need to take down the line here a week or two, maybe dig into some things again? I guess it'll depend on the questions and the kind of the comments we get back on this video.
Yeah, that's a good reminder. Please let us know what you think about them. If there's something that we're not really clear about, let us know, because if you think we're unclear, somebody else probably does too. And I've tried to explain this stuff a million different ways. Each person gets it a little bit differently. And I tend to not think about things the same way that you guys might, because I see it every day. So let us know if there's anything that we're missing. And like our contact information will be at the end of this video. So give us a call, send us an email. We'll try to help clarify anything that we've maybe left out. But in my closing thought is, don't forget about the little guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so Joe definitely basically lives in the My Profile system. He knows every conceivable nook and cranny, where all the info is, where the data is at, put all this stuff together for us. So definite questions on that. We can certainly help. But, and just a reminder, I'll remind you again. So we got the July 2nd unit and regulated area draw. So that's a big date coming up. If you don't want to be randomly assigned a unit, get in there and put your 5 choices in. And I think we've illustrated today how that can be advantageous for getting an area that you actually want to be. And then be sure to check out video 1, where we talked about My Profile, and then video 2, where we talk with the Kentucky Elk Guides Association. If you're still on the fence, guided versus unguided. I think we ended up just having a fantastic conversation with them. And so that was a good one. Also, again, a lot of info on my profile. Check out the new kind of webpage situation that we've got. I think it's a little better organized for our hunters. I want to thank Joe for he's also been the web designer for the past 2 weeks. So, but and then as always, like Joe said, let us know what you want to hear us talking about. We're going to come back with you next week about a deep dive into archery equipment. So we've got some interesting guests we're going to bring on that have killed some elk out west and have some good experience. So definitely, if you're an archer, tune in for this next episode. Again, don't forget about the July 2nd area draw, and we will see you again in a few days. So, Joe, appreciate you giving us the rundown.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.